Hi dancers, welcome to today's video. Welcome back to BodyKinect by Kendall, our YouTube channel full of dance science videos and dance technique tips. Today we're talking about snapping hip syndrome. So this is a very common phenomenon for dancers. It's actually nicknamed dancer's hip because it is so common. So I'm going to explain a little bit about it, some symptoms and whatnot, and show you some exercises that can help strengthen the muscles to support that specific tendon. Now, I do have to say that I am not a physical therapist, so I'm giving you this disclaimer that I am not a physical therapist. I'm not a medical doctor. So if you're experiencing pain in your body, please go see a medical professional and get evaluated for your own body, because watching a YouTube video may not exactly help you get any better, and it might actually make things worse. So I'm using this as an educational tool, not a diagnosis video. All right. So firstly, what is snapping hip syndrome? Snapping hip syndrome is when you have a tight muscle that is kind of rolling over the tendon at the hip. It's primarily the iliopsoas muscle. So one that is right at the crease of the hip here, one of your primary hip flexor muscles. It's pretty strong and it crosses through the hip joint and onto the femur. So it's pretty powerful. Anytime you're lifting your leg up, especially above 90 degrees, you're going to feel this muscle working. It also could be related to a quadricep tendon at the hip, because if you're feeling that snapping, even when you're coming up just to 90 degrees or before you get to 90 degrees, it could be related to that tendon as well. So if the muscle is really tight and it's kind of pushing and rolling on the tendon back and forth as it starts to contract and relax, that might just mean that we need to do a little extra love to that muscle. Now, a lot of times if dancers hear that the muscle is tight, they automatically think they need to stretch it. And first, I want you to think about, why is this muscle tight? Is the muscle tight because I strengthen it 4 days a week in the gym? Or is it tight because it's actually weak and I need to strengthen it? Because sometimes our muscles like to be sneaky like that, and they like to actually get tightened up when they're not actually as strong as their other muscles around it. And they like to pretend that they're just as strong and just as mighty. And so they tighten up, but in actuality, they really need some help to strengthen and be able to fully relax and contract when they are called to do so. So what I want you to focus on is strengthening those muscles around the hip. I'm going to show you some exercises that I like to use for the dancers that I work with virtually if they're experiencing any of this snapping. But generally speaking, if you feel any kind of pinching or snapping in the hip, or a clicking sound, a popping sound, that's usually related to snapping hip syndrome. There's internal and external snapping hip syndrome, which are similar phenomenons, but just in different places. So the most common one that I see is internal snapping hip syndrome, that happens deeper and more in the front. If you feel any sort of burning or pain traveling down the leg or anything like that, that's definitely going to be a more serious issue that you need to see a medical professional for. If it's more of just a pop, but it doesn't hurt when it happens, it's probably not something you need to worry about too much. But we can still work on strengthening the muscles of your core for stability, and then hip flexor strengthening to help support that hip joint. So I'm going to use a foam roller for this first exercise. If you don't have a foam roller, that's okay. You can do it without, but you could also grab a yoga block or a thick book, or even stack a couple pillows just to kind of raise your hips off the ground. So the first exercise is eccentric hip flexor control. So you're going to lay down. If you have the roller, place it right underneath the tailbone. And then I'm just going to take one leg up in the air, okay? Now from here, I'm going to lower that leg all the way down super slow until it touches the floor. And then I'm going to bend it in, straighten it back up. Slowly lower all the way down, slide it in and back up. Now the goal is here, if you have your leg up in the air, it's got to stay straight, okay? So it's not going to come all the way up here and be bent. Just lift it to here and then bring it down. Now you might still notice a little bit of snapping here. If that is happening to your hips, I want you to think about engaging your core a little bit more, tightening everything here and going even slower, squeezing these quad muscles the whole way down. Squeeze, 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 and then come back in. Let's try that on the other side too. Even though you might feel that snapping or popping on one side only, we want to make sure we're still strengthening both sides to be as even as possible. just for overall hip health and alignment, and for your dance technique too. We don't want to be dancers that can only do tricks on one side. We want to be able to do both sides and be a nice, well-rounded dancer, right? Let's do 2 more on this side. Good, and last one. Perfect, good. Come all the way back in. I'm gonna lift my hips up and bring my roller off to the side for this next one. The next one's called leg changes. Bring both legs up to a tabletop position. I don't want your knees to be tight in towards your chest. Bring them apart a little bit so they're right in line with the hips. Take one leg down and tap the toes onto the floor. Lift it back up to tabletop. Other leg down and tap. And lift. Now this is a classic Pilates exercise called leg changes. The goal here is to not arch your back off the floor or like let your foot slam down into the floor. We have to control it and think about keeping that tension in your core. So it's really more of a core exercise than it is a leg exercise. And I can feel a little bit of my snapping happening. Let me see if I can put my mic close to my hip so you can hear it. Did you hear it? A little ASMR. Okay. Anyway, keep going. 4 and 3, 2 and 1. Perfect, good. So for me, when I notice that I'm engaging my core a lot more, it makes it a lot easier for me to feel the right tension in the right places without gripping onto the front of the hip and letting that popping happening. I want to create stability and control throughout my core to support all of that, yeah? Another really good core stability exercise is on your hands and knees in a bear crawl position. So you're going to tuck your toes underneath you, lift the knees up off the floor and hold it here and hover. Ideally, I want you to try to hold for 30 seconds. Even if you hold for 15 seconds and then rest and then do another set, that's great. But the goal here is to really keep the hips nice and low to the floor, keep the knees nice and low to the floor without letting your core arch or kind of like round or like drop down to the floor. You want to keep that tension the whole time. Last exercise that is really good for hip flexors is a hip flexor endurance exercise. So I call this one stir the pot. You're gonna lift the leg up, hold it there. I'm just gonna hold onto the wall for balance. And I'm gonna keep my knee up as I let my foot kind of dangle into a little circle. So I'm just gonna rotate that leg around, keep the knee where it is. Don't hold on to the knee because then your hip flexor is not really doing its job. So keep the knee up and then reverse the circle. My hip flexors are already burning. 3, 2, 1, and down. Oof. Yeah. All right. Other side. Pull that leg up. Circle the foot around. Don't move the knee, just the foot. Keep breathing. Ah. And reverse it. Good. 3, 2, 1. And relax. Now, I should have mentioned this earlier, but even if you can only lift your leg to here without it popping, then just stick to here. Gradually, you can increase the height of your knee and then work on that range. But even if you are just here, that is totally fine. Start there. That's a really good progression. All right, so I hope that these exercises kind of give you a little bit of a start in terms of strengthening your hip flexors. I think all dancers need to strengthen their hip flexors. I think that they are chronically tight for a lot of dancers because we don't do any supplemental training. So even if you're not experiencing any snapping in your hip, add these exercises to your warm-up. They're gonna be really, really good for your legs going to the front, like grand bas, développés, leg holds, and to the side. Anything where you're coming up to a passe position, doing a tendu to the front. We use these muscles all the time, so we need to make sure they're nice and strong. I hope you have a great day. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video.